Our tale kicks off in a world totally flipped on its head by this little thing called awakening. In a godforsaken, frozen wasteland, a bunch of heavy hitters had gathered. Their main event? The Death Den, a top-shelf S-rank dungeon that housed some ancient, grumpy entity. This particular dungeon, being the very first to pop up on planet Azure, had stayed unbeaten for decades. Its front door was basically an open-air cemetery, littered with the bones of countless masters who never clocked out. But hey, today was different. A certified mad lad named Su Ming had decided to solo the Death Den, and after a brutal all-out brawl, he actually strolled out victorious, having just iced the dungeon's god-tier boss. But as he staggered to the exit, totally gassed, he wasn't exactly met with a welcoming party. Nope, instead, he was jumped by the very guys who used to be his bros. They had him completely surrounded, and their vibes were anything but friendly. One of them sneered, telling Su Ming to quit squirming and fork over the divine artifact he'd just bled for. Another joker declared that his fate was pretty much a done deal, sarcastically dubbing him a hero of humanity and promising a mercifully quick end if he just rolled over. Su Ming, with what little power he had left crackling around him like a bad wire, finally saw the whole pathetic picture. They'd let him do all the heavy lifting, just so they could swoop in and yoink the ultimate prize. He had to ask, was this your scummy plan from the very beginning? Out from the pack of hyenas, a blonde pretty boy named Jing Tang strutted forward, pulling out his sword, which hummed with a nasty blue lightning. He made it official, squaring up against the man he once called his brother, demanding the divine artifact and having the nerve to play the friendship card, offering to let Su Ming live in exchange for it. Smirking, Jing Tang bragged that he could just crush what little juice Su Ming had left anyway. Gripping his own sword, which blazed with a fiery red fury, Su Ming could only curse himself for being so naive. He had treated these clowns like family since they were just kids, fighting back-to-back with them for years, never once sniffing out the poison they were hiding. Filled with the gut-wrenching bitterness of betrayal, he made a choice. He wasn't going out with a whimper. He raised his weapon, and a massive, chaotic storm of red and purple energy erupted from the divine artifact, setting off a huge explosion. Standing his ground, Su Ming threw down the gauntlet, telling his former comrades, "So, you want the Ring of Dao Defiance, huh? Then you'll have to try and take it. But let's be real, I doubt any of you chumps are man enough." The sheer, overwhelming power flashbanged his ex-allies, leaving them stunned. One of Jang Tang's flunkies got impatient, yelling for the crew to just waste Su Ming already. But a guy named Zhang Mong told him to pump the brakes, warning him not to get too cocky with his shiny new toy. Just as the tension hit its peak, a new player decided to crash the party, descending from the sky. A pink-haired woman named Xiaoman, who was screaming Su Ming's name as she rocketed towards him. She practically crushed him with a dramatic embrace, sobbing about how she heard some bad guys were after him and she was just so worried. Su Ming, the poor sap, reassured her. He puffed out his chest and told her it was all good. These chumps were nothing more than a warm-up. Even so, a little voice in his head wondered how these clowns managed to track him down so perfectly. As he was thinking, Zhang Tong flashed a smug grin that screamed, "It's all going according to plan." In that exact moment, Su Ming felt a sharp, unwelcome poke in his back. Surprise! Xiaoman had just introduced him to her dagger. She whispered in his ear that, whoops, she was the one who snitched on his location. He was, understandably, shook. Su Ming's eyes were glued to the menacing red magic circle glowing on the hand she used to shank him. His brain short-circuited. Why would Times She Asterisk, of all people, pull a stunt like this? Across the way, Zhang Tong was howling with victory, announcing that the final piece of his master plan was now in place. He then roared the command to activate their little surprise, an imprisonment formation. Right on cue, a massive, blood-red sigil materialized in the sky directly above Su Ming, slamming the trap shut. To add insult to injury, glowing red chains erupted from the stab wound, wrapping around his entire body and cutting off his power supply like a faulty breaker. He recognized the curse mark instantly. It was Xiaoman's signature. The gut-wrenching realization hit him. She'd been plotting this for a long time. Zhang Tong casually sauntered over to Xian, draping an arm around her as if he owned the place. He began a gloating monologue, explaining that this little cage was specially tailor-made just for him, guaranteed to stop him from using any of his fancy powers. Xian chimed in with a cruel smirk, adding that she was, and always had been, with Zhang Tong. She coldly informed Su Ming that his only purpose was to be their little tool, all thanks to his rare 9-star talent. They just needed a chump like him to go fetch the divine artifact for them. Broken and betrayed on every level, Su Ming crashed to his knees, letting out a raw scream of pure rage and agony. With the hero bound and neutralized, Zhang Tong gave the order to his minions, finish him and take the artifact. The goon squad charged, weapons glowing, ready to turn him into a kebab. But just as their blades were about to connect, the ground itself violently erupted. A colossal skeletal hand burst forth from the earth, followed by a whole tidal wave of skeletal warriors that slammed into the attackers, forming a bony shield around Su Ming. He could only stare in total shock, wondering who in the hell just showed up to save him. Just when things looked grim, his savior dropped in a mysterious chick with lilac hair and a cloak straight out of an assassin's catalog. Su Ming instantly knew who it was, Ji Yao, the baddest necromancer in town. She touched down like a superhero, planting herself right between him and the goon squad, clutching a staff that was practically humming with power. She shot him a look and was like, "Don't you dare tap out on me now," hell-bent on making sure these clowns didn't get their greasy hands on the artifact. Of course, Jiang Tong just laughed in her face, basically calling her another fool lining up for a dirt nap. He got all cocky, bragging that with dozens of so-called masters backing him up, not even the big boss emperor himself could bail Su Ming out this time. His lackeys immediately went head-to-head with Ji Yao's spooky skeleton crew. Jiang Tong, now totally seeing red, made a beeline straight for Ji Yao, screaming that anyone who got in his way was getting deleted. While Ji Yao was busy throwing hands, one of Jiang Tong's goons yelled out a friendly warning for her to watch her six. But psych, it was a total fake-out. The whole warning was just a cheap trick to get her to look away, and she fell for it, turning in shock just in time for Jiang Tong to get all up in her personal space, swinging his zappy, lightning-covered weapon right at her. He muttered some garbage about how she, his classmate, shouldn't take it personally. Meanwhile, Su Ming, still tied up like a Christmas present, could do nothing but watch the horror show and scream her name as the attack landed a direct hit. With Ji Yao down for the count, Jiang Tong saw his golden opportunity. He taunted Su Ming, saying it was real cute he was worried about someone else when it was his turn to get sent to the Shadow Realm. Then, like the psycho he was, he shoved his glow stick of a blade deep into Su Ming's chest. Leaning in close, Jiang Tong offered one last twisted deal. Cough up the artifact, and he might just let his pathetic life continue. But Su Ming wasn't going out like a chump. He had one last trick up his sleeve, grabbing onto those magical chains. With blood literally gushing from his mouth, he gave his backstabbing buddies a look that could curdle milk. He spat out that they were nothing but absolute monsters, just as a terrifying red and black aura started to go Super Saiyan inside him. In a final all-or-nothing Hail Mary, Su Ming decided to hit the big red self-destruct button. He screamed the name of the technique. God-tier technique. Annihilation Burst. A world-ending explosion just erupted from his body, forcing Jiang Tong and Ren Xiaoman to nope out of there in a panic. When the dust settled, the whole battlefield was eerily quiet. And there was Su Ming, looking like he'd gone 10 rounds with a meat grinder, reaching out and whispering Ji Yao's name. He somehow dragged himself over to her, holding her busted-up body and just drowning in regret, asking her why the heck she'd come for a screw-up like him who'd let her down so many times. But Ji Yao, with this faint, peaceful smile on her face, reached up to touch his face, telling him that if this was really the end of the line for them, then they might as well check out together. As his own life was fading to black, Su Ming somehow found one last ounce of strength. His sword poofed into existence and slammed down into the ground right in front of him. Cradling Gui's lifeless body, he issued one final, epic proclamation to his backstabbing buddies. Su Ming, the legendary god slayer, spat out a blood-soaked vow. If he ever got a do-over, he'd hunt down Ren Xiaoman and Jiang Tong and personally rip them limb from freaking limb. His so-called friends just stared from afar, looking totally clueless. And then, the light bulb finally flickered on in Jiang Tong's thick skull. He suddenly understood Su Ming's insane last-ditch play. The absolute madman was planning to take the divine artifact with him to the grave, yeeting it into the abyss of the death den just so they could never get their greedy hands on it. With his final curse hanging in the air, Su Ming basically dared them. "You want the divine artifact? Come and get it, losers." With that, he took a swan dive right off the cliff, clutching Ji Yao. He plummeted straight into the swirling chaos below, and in his hand, the Ring of Dao Defiance erupted in a golden flashbang of holy moly level light. The whole world dissolved into pure white. Su Ming's hand fell limp. It looked like the final curtain call. But then his consciousness rebooted. He wasn't in some dark, spooky abyss, but staring up at a painfully bright blue sky and a school building that looked suspiciously familiar. Utterly baffled, his brain did a complete blue screen of death when some voice crackled over a loudspeaker. Some monotone announcer was droning on about the results of the 127th awakening ceremony at Xuanjing First Academy. Apparently, some kid named Wang Qiang had just successfully awakened, but his big prize was Enchanter, basically a glorified arts and crafts class. Meanwhile, Su Ming, who was now somehow a scrawny teenager again, was just standing there in a sea of other awkward high schoolers. He caught some kids whispering that the school's luck was in the toilet this year, but those two words, awakening ceremony, hit him like a truck. A wave of cosmic déjà vu washed over him as the horrifying truth dawned. He'd actually time-traveled. He was 18 years old all over again, right back on the day of his time's own time's cringy awakening ceremony. As Su Ming just stood there, sandwiched between a bunch of nervous students, the memories of this exact day came flooding back in glorious high definition. He spotted Wang Chang, the dude everyone used to call Fatty. He remembered clear as day that Wang Chang had rolled Enchanter in his past life too. Welp, so much for this being a bad dream. Alright, time for a real memory test. He focused on the next kids in the lineup. He recalled that Li Songyang was about to pop off as a 2-star warrior, Chen Yu's awakening was going to be a total bust, and Song Li would luck into becoming a battle mage. And just like clockwork, it all played out exactly as he predicted. Li Songyang was already celebrating his big warrior debut. Next up was Qian Yu, who was bawling his eyes out after his awakening turned out to be a total dud. And right after him was Song Li, who actually managed to become a battle mage. As every single event unfolded exactly like a rerun from his memories, Su Ming's last shred of doubt completely vanished. A smug grin spread across his face as it finally sank in. He had seriously hit the cosmic reset button, but that grin instantly twisted into pure rage as the gut-wrenching memory of Zheng Tang and Ren Xiaoman's betrayal came flooding back. He could feel it in his bones. This do-over had to be a gift from the gods, a golden ticket to fix his past and serve up some ice-cold revenge. But his revenge plotting was cut short by a collective gasp from the audience. Up on stage, a baby-faced Zhang Tang was in the middle of his awakening, and he was wrapped in this insane, pulsating purple aura. The announcer, practically screaming into the mic, declared that Zhang Tang had unlocked a rare hidden combat class, the Demon Puppet Warrior. And get this, with a ridiculously powerful 8-star innate attribute. The students were absolutely losing their minds. Of course, they all started gossiping that you'd expect nothing less from the golden boy of the prestigious Zhang family. Hearing all the chatter, Su Ming just glared at his future nemesis with a cold, burning hatred. And while the announcer was busy gushing over the school's new genius, Su Ming felt someone tap him on the shoulder. He spun around and froze, completely stunned to see a young, vibrant Gi Yao decked out in her school uniform. "There you are. I've been looking all over for you," she said, then noticed his shell-shocked face. "Hey, is something wrong?" Hit by a tidal wave of emotions, he quickly got a grip and smoothly replied, "Nah, just wanted to congratulate you in advance." Gi Yao just looked at him, completely baffled. "Congratulate me for what?" she asked, just as the horrific image of her dying in his arms flashed through his mind. A real, honest-to-God, gentle smile spread across his face. "Oh, it's nothing," he said cryptically. "You'll get it soon enough." He was just so incredibly relieved. He couldn't help but add, "It's just so good to see you again." And right as the words left his mouth, the announcer called out the next name, Gi Yao. Startled, she quickly hurried up to the stage. She cautiously placed her hand on the celestial steel. It was a massive, ancient artifact, just humming and crackling with blue energy. The second her fingers made contact, a colossal surge of power exploded from the stone, completely swallowing her in light. The announcer's voice, now dripping with disbelief, boomed out that Ji Yao had awakened a hidden combat class, Necromancer, with a mighty 7-star attribute. The rest of the students were just completely floored. The crowd was buzzing, their minds completely blown. Su Ming, however, just watched with a cool, all-knowing smirk. He thought to himself, "Yep, everything's going according to my script." And now, it was his time to shine. The announcer finally called for Su Ming. As he casually strolled toward the stage, Ji wished him good luck, but you could tell the other students were anything but hopeful. They were whispering trash, convinced it was impossible for a third hidden class to show up, especially for a broke orphan like Su Ming. Alright, let's pause for a quick lore dump to get everyone up to speed. We're on planet Azure, in the Dragon Nation. a world dominated by the ridiculously powerful awakened. Decades back, the whole awakening thing kicked off and changed the game forever. Since then, every person who hits 18 years old joins a big ceremony to see if they can become one of these elite awakened. These chosen few have completely reshaped the world, wielding the power to warp reality and rake in unimaginable wealth. But, as you'd expect, that kind of cheat code power comes with a hefty price tag. The awakened have to constantly throw down in endless challenges, taking on savage beasts and diving into terrifying, monster-infested dungeons. As he walked up to the celestial stele, Su Ming's mind flashed back to his previous life. He remembered what it was like being an orphan, surviving on stipends and scholarships. On the day of his very first awakening, he was basically chosen by the heavens. A mind-blowing celestial phenomenon had appeared, and he awakened a super-rare 9-star innate attribute, plus the legendary class known as the God Slayer. Now, back on this stage in his second life, he was absolutely determined to rewrite his destiny. He reached his hand toward the awakening artifact, vowing that today was the day he'd make every single person eat their words. The second he touched it, a colossal surge of purple and pink energy exploded upwards, creating a spectacular light show in the sky. The announcer just stared, his jaw on the floor. He wondered if this insane power surge meant a genius with a 9-star attribute was born, or maybe something even more legendary. Ji and the rest of the students were just as stunned, completely frozen in place. Su Ming reached out, preparing to feel that familiar rush of runes from his first awakening. But this time, something felt completely and utterly different. A glowing blue sigil flared to life on his chest, and out of it popped the divine artifact he had died with, the Ring of Dao Defiance, materializing out of thin air. He was totally shocked. It hit him that the ring had somehow hitched a ride back in time with him. Before he could even begin to process that, another completely unexpected thing happened. A bizarre sensation began to creep through his veins, and just like that, a holographic screen popped into existence. A system notification blared to life, announcing the ultimate Godslayer class system was successfully locking onto him. Then it dropped the bombshell. The system had slapped him with a brand new class, confirming his awakening was a total success. But this wasn't his old class from before. Oh no, he'd been blessed with something infinitely cooler, a mythic tier class called the Sword God. Su Ming just stood there, his jaw practically on the floor. He was thinking, is a mythic class even a real thing? While trying to process the ridiculously OP title he'd just snagged. The insane crimson energy blasting off Su Ming left everyone completely gobsmacked. The announcer, totally shook, was wondering what kind of class could possibly cause a scene like this. Meanwhile, in the crowd, students were buzzing about what it all meant. One dude fretted that if it was a non-combat class, Su Ming would be totally screwed. But Tang immediately shot that down, saying that with a light show that epic, it couldn't possibly be some lame lifestyle class. And yet, as he watched, a waterfall of sweat was pouring down his face from the sheer, crushing pressure of Su Ming's aura, so intense he was frozen solid. But Su Ming? He was just chilling in the middle of the energy hurricane, casually scrolling through the info on the golden panel in front of him. He confirmed his new awakened class was the Sword God, a hell of an upgrade from the Godslayer gig in his past life. He tapped the system interface, which ran a quick ID scan, and confirmed his identity as Su Ming. And then, boom, his new stats popped up. His class was the Sword God, and get this, he even possessed a golden tier talent, called Universal Ascension, which gave him the busted ability to upgrade or evolve literally anything. Su Ming was absolutely floored. He realized a golden talent was a whole rank higher than the legendary 9-star class he'd awakened before. A smug grin crept onto his face as it dawned on him. This new power should blow that old god's class out of the water. Giddy with excitement, he swiped open the skill interface to check out his new toys, and just like that, his hype train crashed and burned. The skill screen was completely blank, showing 0 progress and a single, soul-crushing message. No abilities have been awakened. Su Ming saw red. He practically grabbed the holographic panel by the throat, screaming in his head, how in the world does a golden rank talent come with not a single freaking skill? While Su Ming was having his internal meltdown, the crowd was getting antsy, totally confused by the holdup. Finally, the announcer shouted, "Hey kid, you done with your awakening or what?" Su Ming was absolutely fuming, glaring at the totally blank skill interface. He couldn't wrap his head around awakening a supposedly god-tier class, only to find out it had 0 abilities. He was seriously starting to think the system was just messing with him. Then, right on cue, the panel flickered with a new message, coolly stating it had received his feedback and would now resume its guidance. A new prompt pointed his gaze toward the Ring of Dao Defiance just floating there. Utterly baffled, he stared at the ring as it started to hum with light, and the system announced it had successfully identified the divine artifact. The very instant the ring was officially recognized, the system panel blazed like the sun, and an absolutely massive pillar of golden light erupted from Su Ming's spot, rocketing straight into the sky. The insane shockwave blasted outwards, forcing the announcer, who was none other than the Academy's principal, to dig in his heels. High above the celestial stele, a gigantic, shimmering, multicolored star materialized, with the number 10 glowing at its center. The principal's eyes practically popped out of his head. He stammered in pure disbelief, recognizing the mark of a 10-star innate attribute. His voice absolutely thundered through the microphone, bellowing that Su Ming had awakened a 10-star hidden class. Swordmaster. The crowd went into a full-blown meltdown, screaming about the heaven-defying talent of a 10-star attribute, a tier reserved for the nation's absolute monsters. Zhang Tong just stood there, completely dumbfounded. Meanwhile, another student muttered that he thought Zhang Tong's 8-star awakening was already crazy, but Su Ming just went and dropped a maxed-out 10-star attribute like it was nothing. The principal, beaming like a proud father, declared this a historic year for the Academy. Not only did they get a bunch of hidden classes, but now they had a bona fide chosen one with a 10-star attribute. He admitted that the Swordmaster class wasn't exactly S-tier, but with a 10-star innate talent, Su Ming's future potential was basically off the charts. As a reward, the principal announced he'd personally gift Su Ming a full set of items to boost his cultivation. However, not everyone was on the hype train. Whispers of disappointment started to spread through the crowd. Some students were already calling it a tragic waste of talent, explaining that Swordmaster was a bottom-of-the-barrel class. They griped that it was just a mediocre jack-of-all-trades, forcing you to train in both ranged and close-quarters combat, splitting your focus between physical and magical damage, making it the poster child for a fundamentally underpowered class. The peanut gallery started cracking up at his rotten luck, clowning on him for landing a 10-star talent only to get stuck with such a garbage-tier class. A couple of good souls tried to stick up for him, arguing that if he just grinded hard enough, even a swordmaster could eventually dish out some decent damage. And with Su Ming's god-tier talent, he was basically a shoo-in to make it work. But the haters shot that down immediately, pointing out the class demands double the effort for half the payoff, and that he'd be lucky to even survive a tutorial-level dungeon. Up on the stage, Su Ming caught every last one of their condescending remarks. He angled his head just a bit, his eyes hidden in shadow, thinking, "So they all think my Swordmaster class is absolute trash, huh?" While the crowd kept buzzing, Guy jogged right up to Su Ming, flashing a brilliant smile. She laid a big congrats on him. Su Ming returned the favor. Guy Yao then told him to just tune out all the haters' noise, cause awakening a 10-star talent was a huge deal. She admitted that yeah, the Swordmaster class kinda sucks in the early game, but she was totally convinced that with his level of talent, it would be a total non-issue. Su Ming shot her a warm smile and a thanks, letting her know he wasn't about to let their trash talk get under his skin. Then he dropped a little hint, saying that them underestimating him was all part of the plan, which totally threw Guy Yao for a loop. Their chat got cut short when the announcer called up the next student. The whole place erupted as Ren Xiaoman, the school's #1 idol, made her way to the stage. Zhang Tong was spotted cheering her on. Guy couldn't help but comment on how popular she was, but Su Ming didn't say a word. Instead of sticking around for the show, Su Ming just turned on his heel and started walking off. Guy called after him, totally baffled, reminding him that the ceremony was still going. Su Ming shot back with an icy tone, not even bothering to look back. Not interested. And as he continued on his way, a tidal wave of agonizing memories from his past life crashed over him. He remembered clear as day how Ren Xiaoman had played him for a fool, only to backstab and end him without a second thought. He remembered the oath he swore with his dying breath, and his resolve for payback in this life hardened into steel. A little later, Su Ming was strolling through the city, noticing that the world looked exactly like he remembered. But he knew, deep down, that not everything was the same. Aside from his new class, he pulled up his system window and found a brand new skill: total concealment. This legendary grade skill was a game changer, letting him completely hide or even fake the info on his gear, his class, and all of his other skills. Hold up, he recognized that skill. It was one of the 4 legendary abilities he'd brought back from his past life. That thought triggered another memory. The glowing Ring of Dao Defiance. He stared down at his hands, completely floored, finally getting it. The divine artifact had actually followed him back in time. As Su Ming was still processing this bombshell, the system panel lit up again. It announced it was loading the divine artifact, and as the ring integrated with him, a new message popped up. Su Ming had inherited a chunk of skills from his old god class. He just stared, completely dumbfounded. How in the world was it possible to get skills from his past life's class when his new one was the sword god? A detailed status screen materialized out of thin air, displaying his name, Su Ming, level 1, with some nicely balanced base stats. His class was confirmed as the one-of-a-kind mythic world unique sword god, and his talent was the ridiculously OP universal ascension. The skills section was now rocking 4 new abilities: Godslayer's Blade, Total Concealment, Shadow Step, and Insightful Eye. With this game-changing info, the gears in Su Ming's head began to turn. He remembered an old saying, "A man is innocent, but give him a treasure and he becomes a target," to avoid getting used by a bunch of opportunists, and since he wasn't strong enough yet, he knew he had to play it cool. While his 10-star talent was basically a giant neon sign, he decided he had to keep all information about his true mythic class on the down low, the sword god. He swore to himself he would nail this second chance and not repeat his past screw-ups. He knew from his past run that the beginner dungeon challenge was set to drop on the second day after the awakening ceremony. With his insider knowledge and OP skills, Su Ming was confident the beginner dungeon would be a total cakewalk. His goal was to power level faster than anyone and snag all the best loot. To do that, he decided to go straight for the dungeon's final boss right from the get-go. But first, he needed a decent weapon. Meanwhile, in a swanky room atop a skyscraper called the Palace, a whole other scene was playing out. Zhang Tang and Ren Xiaoman were together. Ren Xiaoman teased Zhang Tang for whisking her off to a place like this right after the ceremony, but Zhang Tang was just irritated. He snapped at her not to even mention the ceremony, whining that Su Ming had completely stolen his thunder. Ren Xiaoman, however, was already scheming. She told him not to be mad, explaining that even though Su Ming was just times a swordmaster, his awakening stats were off the charts. She promised him Su Ming would be an incredibly useful pawn for them later on. Totally hooked, Zhang Tang immediately asked what she had in mind. Ren Xiaoman cracked a sly little smirk and flashed him something on her phone. As Zhang Tang stared at the screen, his ticked-off expression melted into pure shock. With a cold, calculating glint in her eye, Ren Xiaoman laid out her entire devious plan. She was absolutely certain that if she just dangled a little bait, Su Ming would snatch it up. Then, just like the good old days, they could play him like a fiddle. Meanwhile, following his own time's grand scheme, Su Ming rolled up to a colossal skyscraper that was basically a mega mall for weapons. He rode the elevator up to the 12th floor and was greeted by some chipper employee at the weapons emporium. As he casually strolled through the place, he noticed it was crawling with fresh-faced newbies, all prepping for the beginner dungeon trial. He overheard a few of them whining about being broke, realizing they'd have to grind in dungeons forever just for a decent weapon. Su Ming's attention was suddenly snagged by a huge crowd huddled around one specific display. They were all drooling over a glowing, blue sword called the Tyrant's Frost Blade, a supposed diamond-rank weapon forged by some high-level greatsword player. The crowd was absolutely losing it over how powerful it looked, gossiping about how it could supposedly freeze the blood in a monster's veins, but they all choked when they saw the price, a cool 1 million advent coins. As they kept on gushing, Su Ming just smirked to himself. He remembered from his past life that this shiny piece of junk was a complete fake, and the shady merchant selling it was destined to get busted. His gloating was cut short by a voice. He turned to find a sharply dressed woman with short gray hair, flanked by 2 beefy bodyguards. She cut right to the chase, asking if he was Su Ming. He shot back, asking who wanted to know. The woman introduced herself as Zhang Lan, the vice director of the Zhang Anan group, as she handed him her business card. Su Ming glanced at the card and deadpanned. "Don't think we've met." Zhang Lan totally ignored him and announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, that on behalf of the Zhang Anan group, she would be covering his entire shopping spree for the day. Then she leaned in, saying she hoped he could do her a little favor. When Su Ming asked what the catch was, she signaled a bodyguard to show him a photo. It was a picture of a young, smiling girl, with her eyes hidden from view, sitting in a field of white flowers. Zhang Lan casually mentioned the girl was her little sister, Zhang Yuning. Apparently, she went to his school too and was a freshly minted awakened. She then dropped the bomb that she'd already done her homework on him and knew all about his 10-star talent, arguing that with his kind of power, the beginner's dungeon would be a total cakewalk. She pointed out that only newbies could get in, and then she finally got to the point. She wanted him to party up with her sister and basically babysit her through the trial to make sure she passed without a scratch. After a beat, Su Ming shot her down cold, saying he wasn't interested, and started to walk off. Jianglan was completely stunned. She yelled after him, getting desperate. She offered him literally any weapon in the entire shop if he'd just say yes. But all she got back was dead air. Fuming, she silently raged about how some broke student who hit the jackpot once had the nerve to turn her times down. Right when Jianglan was about to blow a gasket, Su Ming came to a halt. He turned around with a perfectly calm look on his face and said, "Oh, is that right?" He then pointed a finger at the priciest weapon in the whole place and declared he'd take the tyrant's frostblade. You know, the decorative piece of junk worth a cool 1 million advent coins? Jinglan completely lost it. She was convinced he was just trying to shake her down for all she was worth. She snapped at him for deliberately being a pain and sneered, asking if he seriously thought a nobody like him was worth 1 million coins. Su Ming just calmly reminded her that she was the one who said he could have his pick of any weapon. He told her that if she was going to back out of her own offer, then the deal was off. With a smug little grin, he then offered her a free piece of advice. He told her to let her sister know she better start grinding for real, hinting that there are some things big sister's money can't buy. Shockingly, Jianglan's fury just melted away. In its place, a curious smirk started to form on her face. She decided Su Ming was actually interesting and silently admitted she'd been out of line. Then, she turned and walked out with her goons. The crowd was floored, whispering about how some random student just played the big shots from the Jung H group like a fiddle. Just as they were leaving the scene, Su Ming's phone buzzed. He glanced down and saw a message from Ren Xiaoman. The message was word for word what he remembered. It started by asking if he'd had a crush on her this whole time, then claimed she'd suddenly had a change of heart, and asked him to meet her on the roof of the main school building that night. Su Ming thought with a cold smirk that even though he hadn't awakened as the God Slayer this time around, Ren Xian, and her same old manipulative playbook, but he never forgot his promise of sweet, sweet vengeance. So he fired back a simple text, agreeing to her little meetup. With that drama handled for now, Su Ming got back to the real mission, gearing up. He moseyed on over to a shop assistant, pointing at a display of jagged, rock-like things called sword stones. The clerk explained they were basically weapon loot boxes, with a sliver of a chance to pop a silver rank weapon. But, she warned him, it was a total crapshoot, a game of pure luck, and most of these rocks just held the most basic, bargain bin gear. To her absolute shock, Su Ming just grinned and said that was exactly what he was looking for. He broke down his galaxy brain logic. Why waste a fortune on a silver weapon that's just going to be obsolete in a few levels, when it was way smarter to gamble on snagging one from a dirt-cheap rock? Of course, as he scanned the stones, he was thinking to himself that for him, this wasn't a gamble in the slightest. The secret? He could literally see the item data inside the stones. This little cheat code was another perk he brought back from his past life, the one and only Eye of Insight. A system notification helpfully reminded him this legendary skill let his eyes see the true nature of, well, everything. Using this hack's ability, he confidently scooped up one of the stones like he was picking the winning lottery ticket. He knew a normal silver weapon would run him hundreds, if not thousands, of advent coins, but using his skill to fish one out of the bargain bin? Now that's a 5-star strat for a broke student like him. Su Ming sat down with his chosen weapon stone, ready to crack it open. His little stunt, however, had attracted an audience of other students, led by some loudmouth with bleached blonde hair. The guy immediately recognized him as the legend who just gave the powerful Jong-un group the middle finger. The blonde dude and his 2 cronies swaggered over to Su Ming, sneering. The leader started mocking him for holding a garbage weapon stone, cackling at the very idea that Su Ming would actually turn down a golden ticket from a mega corporation just to play lottery with a piece of junk. They all started calling Su Ming an idiot, but our boy was completely unfazed. He instantly recognized the blonde bully as Yang Ding, a spoiled rich brat from his past life whose only hobby was picking on the newbies. Deciding this whole situation was a drag, Su Ming figured he might as well have some fun with them. He calmly turned to Yang Ding and laid down a challenge, a little bet of, say, 5,000 advent coins, that he could pull a silver rank weapon from the very stone in his hand. After a solid second of stunned silence, Yang Ding and his goons absolutely erupted in hysterical laughter. Thinking he'd found the world's biggest sucker, Yang Ding started running his mouth, sneering that there was a 99.9% chance the rock was pure junk, and that he'd never seen someone so desperate to burn their cash. Su Ming just smirked and shot back, "We'll see who's really making it rain in a minute." Like a fool taking the bait, Yang Ding jumped at the bet, and a crowd started to form, smelling a showdown. Su Ming announced he was cracking it open right here, right now, warning the loudmouth not to even think about weaseling out of it. Yang Ding just cackled, telling him to start worrying about the 5,000 coins he was about to be out. With all eyes on him, Su Ming casually activated his Eye of Insight. His whole world went into analysis mode, revealing the brilliant red sword glowing like a jackpot inside the rock. With a confident shout, he smashed the stone wide open. A blinding crimson light exploded from the fragments as a beast of a sword shot out. Yang Ding's jaw hit the floor, while his goons and the entire crowd just stood there, completely shell-shocked, as Su Ming casually snatched the weapon by its hilt. A system notification popped up, giving him the deets on his shiny new toy. A black iron crimson sword. It was a low-grade silver weapon with a sick, special affix called Crimson Drinker, which let it leech life from monsters to heal him up. Standing there in the dead silence of the stunned crowd, Su Ming gave his new sword a once-over, admiring his fine new weapon. He then thought with a stone-cold, determined expression that this new blade would be the perfect accessory for his date with Ren Xian later tonight. Yang Ding and his crew were practically statues, their brains completely short-circuited, unable to process that Su Ming had actually pulled a silver-rank weapon from a garbage rock. Su Ming, on the other hand, was just casually inspecting the sword, muttering, not half bad. He was especially digging the lifesteal ability, realizing it basically made healers obsolete for his next dungeon trial. A system panel confirmed the weapon was a silver-rank black steel sword with a sweet plus 10% lifesteal. As Yang Ding started to hyperventilate, Su Ming aimed the tip of the blade right at his face, reminding the punk that a deal's a deal. And those 5,000 advent coins had a new owner. Utterly crushed, Yang Ding coughed up the cash. Stomping away like a toddler, he screamed that he'd never forget being clowned on like this. Su Ming just shrugged, calling after him, "Maybe don't bet your lunch money next time, pal." The shopkeeper was just standing there, mind absolutely blown, realizing it had been ages since anyone got anything but a paperweight out of those rocks. Flush with his new cash, Su Ming strolled back to the counter for a scabbard, casually asking if 5,000 coins would even cover it. The poor, flustered assistant just about tripped over himself to confirm it would. He copped a flashy, golden-trimmed silver-rank scabbard that slashed weapon durability loss by a sweet 50%. Su Ming was pretty stoked, knowing this would save him a ton on repair bills for his new toy. The moment he sheathed his sword, a system notification popped up like an unwanted ad. It asked if he felt like flipping the switch on a hidden function called Weapon Manifestation. He passed on it, figuring it wasn't the right time to show all his cards. A wicked smirk crept across his face. He was already thinking about how he still needed to grind with this new weapon to get its rank up. Later, while cutting through a park, Su Ming took a second to review his current character build. He had to admit, for a so-called sword god, his skill tree was laughably empty. But on the flip side, his class came with a primal talent that was just completely broken. Universal Ascension. This one-of-a-kind cheat let him juice up the quality of any item one single time. Yeah, that little perk alone made his mythic class worth the hype. Gripping his sword, he decided to give it a whirl. He just thought about it, and a system notification immediately chimed in. Universal Ascension activated. Ding. Ascension successful. Effect Crimson Drinker has been obtained. The sword immediately began to pulse with an intimidating, blood-red aura. A final window displayed the weapon's new stats. A high silver rank crimson black steel sword. Its Crimson Drinker ability was now buffed to literally leech an enemy's life force on contact. And to top it off, it scored a brand new skill. Bloodthirst. It granted a temporary +5 boost to all stats for a solid 30 seconds after he iced a monster. Su Ming couldn't help but grin at the slick upgrade. With all his prep work finally done, he activated the hidden weapon manifestation, confident tomorrow's beginner dungeon was going to be a total cakewalk. Later that night, Su Ming showed up on the rooftop of the academic building. He cut a sharp silhouette against the neon-drenched, futuristic skyline. His shiny new sword was in his hand, and what do you know? Ren Xian was already there, waiting. She turned with a killer smile and greeted him, playfully calling him out for being late. That smile evaporated in a split second. Without a single word, Su Ming swung his sword right at her. She shrieked and barely dodged the swing as the blade slammed into the concrete ledge right where she'd been standing. She stared in total disbelief, asking him what the hell he was doing. With a cold, dead-eyed stare, Su Ming simply told her it was payback time. A gut-wrenching memory from his last life suddenly hit him like a truck. The exact moment he died, clutching the fading Ji Yao, while Ren Xian just watched, not a single shred of guilt on her face. Ren Xian, looking totally baffled and pissed, shot back. "What in the world are you even talking about?" She reminded him, her voice screeching, that she'd just times, said yes to him, shoving her phone in his face. She flashed the chat logs where he'd literally confessed his feelings and asked her out. She shrieked, totally losing it. "You're the one who begged to date me." She just couldn't wrap her head around why he was suddenly trying to destroy her. Su Ming just stood there, his face like a stone wall, staring her down with an icy, smug-as-hell grin. "Yeah, you're right about the confession," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Thing is, that happened in my last time's life." And just like that, his mind went reeling back in time, to a replay of their entire relationship. He remembered her, the untouchable queen bee of the school. And him? Just some lonely orphan. He vividly recalled the day after the first awakening ceremony. He was feeling totally crushed when she walked up, flashed a perfect, kind smile, and asked if he was okay. From that moment on, he thought he'd finally found someone who cared, which led to the cringy confession text, all those cheesy dates and the moments they got close. But that entire happy-go-lucky memory was instantly obliterated by the image of a photo, her and Zhang Tang, looking way too cozy. The ultimate proof of her backstabbing. Snapping back to the present, Su Ming's face twisted into a mask of pure rage as he roared. "It was all a freaking lie." He pointed a trembling finger at her, his voice shaking with fury. "I know everything. About you and Zhang Tang. You were just playing me the whole time." Ren Xian looked like she'd been struck by lightning, stammering, "That's ridiculous, you're talking crazy," desperately trying to deny everything. But Su Ming wasn't letting up for a second. He leaned in. "Oh, I think you know exactly who's lying here. That whole perfect, beautiful princess act, it's a total sham." He got even closer, his voice practically dripping with poison, and whispered, "The real you is just a pathetic, shameless clout chaser." And with that, Ren Xian's elegant composure completely shattered, her face contorting in pure, ugly rage as the mask finally fell off. She screeched at him. "What could a nobody like you possibly know? You're just an orphan." She spat venomously. "If your talent wasn't even a little bit useful, you wouldn't have ever earned the right to even breathe the same air as me." Then came the threats. "You think you can get away with this? Just wait. Neither I nor Jiang Tong will let you off the hook for humiliating me." Su Ming just hit her with a smirk that basically said, "Is that all you got?" He pretty much dared her to try something, anything. Then he dropped a bomb, wondering out loud how this little drama would play with her squeaky clean, pure as jade reputation. And yep, that was the final straw. She absolutely lost it, boiling with rage. She snatched the sword Su Ming had so conveniently left, stuck in the concrete, and came at him swinging as the steel whistled through the air. Su Ming had a moment of déjà vu, thinking, classic, just like the last timeline. Except this time, he was ready for her little stunt. Right before the blade could connect, wicked-looking tendrils of red energy exploded from the sword itself, freezing it dead in its tracks and leaving Ren Xiaoman's jaw on the floor. Su Ming was like, "Yeah, I saw that coming a mile away." After all, he knew she had a real talent for stabbing people in the back. A system window popped up, confirming the activation of his weapon's Crimson Drinker ability. Ding! The creepy red tendrils then shot out from the blade and coiled around Ren Xiaoman like snakes. Su Ming laid out his master plan. The second he'd locked onto her with his weapon's skill, it was already game over. A tendril lashed out, smacking her right across the face. She let out a blood-curdling shriek, wailing about how he'd ruined her precious face. As she collapsed into a heap on the floor, Su Ming loomed over her and coldly pointed out that she'd totally done this to herself. He was just about to launch into his big, "This is my revenge" speech, but she just had to interrupt him, screaming that she'd get Zhang Tong to end him. Su Ming, completely unbothered, just recalled his sword, which pixelated right back into his inventory. Then he just turned his back and started to walk off, telling her to go cry to Zhang Tong and let him know he's welcome to try his luck anytime. He declared that today's little love tap was their official breakup as he left her sobbing on the rooftop. He figured that blade didn't just mess up her face, it also sliced away any of that old affection he used to be so hung up on. A little while later, His phone buzzed with a notification. Looked like a care package from the academy, sent by none other than Principal Wang. The message congratulated him on his epic awakening and hooked him up with a reward package to get him prepped for the beginner dungeon. Inside the package was some sweet loot. One fortification pill, a full combat gear package, and a cool 10,000 advent coins.